My 8-year-old son handed my ex-husband a letter and said, "I wrote this the day you left. Now you get to read it." What happened next will break your heart and restore your faith in justice at the same time. But before I tell you about that moment that changed everything, you need to understand how we got there, because this story isn't just about revenge. It's about a little boy who grew into the kind of man his father never was. I'm Sarah Mitchell, and 8 years ago, I was standing in Chicago O'Hare Airport with my 8-year-old son Dylan, watching the man I thought I'd spend my life with walk away from us forever. Marcus Reynolds, corporate lawyer, charming smile, and apparently zero capacity for keeping promises, looked me straight in the eye and said, "You'll never hear from me again. Good luck raising him alone." Those words echoed in that busy terminal as hundreds of strangers rushed past us, completely unaware that my entire world had just collapsed. Dylan stood there holding my hand, his little Spider-Man backpack on his shoulders, watching his father disappear into the crowd without even a goodbye hug. I'll never forget how Dylan looked up at me with those big brown eyes, so much like mine, thank God, not Marcus's, and asked, "Mommy, did I do something wrong?" That question nearly destroyed me right there on that cold airport floor. But here's what Marcus didn't know as he walked toward his gate, probably already thinking about his new job in Seattle and the fresh start he'd convinced himself he deserved. Dylan had spent the entire morning before Marcus left writing something in his room. While I was packing Marcus's last few belongings and trying not to cry in front of our son, Dylan was carefully crafting words on a piece of paper with his favorite blue crayon, the one he used for all his important school assignments. When Marcus's taxi pulled up that morning, Dylan ran to his room and came back with a sealed envelope. He'd written "For Dad" on the front in his careful third-grade handwriting. But Marcus was too busy loading his suitcase, too focused on his phone calls about his new apartment, too eager to start his life without us to notice his son trying to give him something. Dylan held that envelope the entire ride to the airport, clutching it like a lifeline. As we watched Marcus walk away, Dylan whispered, "I still have it, Mom." I thought he meant the hurt, the confusion, maybe even the hope that his father would turn around. I had no idea he was talking about that letter. For 8 years, my son carried that envelope in his backpack, day after day, like he was waiting for the right moment to deliver a message that Marcus never bothered to receive. Now, let me tell you about Dylan today. He's 16, 6 feet tall, honor roll student, varsity soccer player, and the kind of young man who brings elderly Mrs. Chen her groceries every Saturday without being asked. He makes me coffee every morning before school, 2 sugars, splash of cream, exactly how I like it. And he's never once complained about our small house or asked why he doesn't have a father like his friends do. Dylan Mitchell became everything Marcus Reynolds pretended to be: reliable, kind, and someone who keeps his word. My mother Linda always said that children are more resilient than we give them credit for, but I never fully understood what she meant until I watched my son transform pain into purpose. While other kids his age are worried about video games and social media drama, Dylan volunteers at the animal shelter, tutors younger kids in math, and somehow manages to make me laugh every single day. He's the kind of person who remembers your birthday, who checks on you when you're sick, who shows up when he says he will. But the most remarkable thing about Dylan isn't his maturity or his kindness. It's his patience. For 8 years, he waited. He waited for the right moment, the right words, the right opportunity to deliver a message that an 8-year-old boy needed his father to hear. And when that moment finally came, when Marcus showed up at Dylan's soccer championship with his new perfect family, my son was ready. Because sometimes the people who abandon us teach us the most important lesson of all: how to be someone who never abandons others. And sometimes, just sometimes, they have to face the children they left behind. Children who grew up to be everything their fathers weren't brave enough to be. After Marcus left, I'll be honest with you, the first year was brutal. I was a 26-year-old single mother with a teaching degree I'd never used because Marcus insisted I stay home with Dylan. I had exactly $800 in my personal checking account, a mortgage I couldn't afford alone, and a heartbroken little boy who kept asking when Daddy was coming home. But here's the thing about rock bottom. It gives you a solid foundation to build on. My mother, Linda, bless her heart, sold her condo in Florida and moved to our little town of Millfield, Illinois, 3 streets away from us. "Sarah Elizabeth," she said on my doorstep with 2 suitcases and her ancient tabby cat, Mr. Whiskers. "That man may have given up on you, but I didn't raise a quitter." Mom became our lifeline. She picked up Dylan from school on the days when I had to stay late for faculty meetings, helped with homework when I was grading papers until midnight, and somehow always knew exactly when to show up with her famous chocolate chip cookies and a listening ear. I landed a job teaching English at Millfield High School, and it turned out I was actually good at it. Really good. There's something magical about watching a teenager's face light up when they finally understand why Shakespeare matters, or when they write their first poem that makes them proud. My students became my extended family, and Dylan grew up thinking it was perfectly normal to have 16 and 17-year-olds asking about his soccer games and helping him with his science projects. Dylan and I created our own traditions. Sunday morning pancakes became sacred. He'd wake me up at 8 sharp, and we'd make them from scratch while dancing to whatever song was stuck in his head that week. He learned to crack eggs without getting shells everywhere, and I learned that maple syrup fixes most of life's problems, at least temporarily. Our kitchen became the heart of our little world, with Dylan's artwork covering the refrigerator and his soccer schedule taped to the cabinet door. My best friend, Rebecca Martinez, became Dylan's unofficial aunt. She's a nurse at the local hospital, tough as nails but with the biggest heart you've ever seen. Rebecca was the one who taught Dylan how to throw a proper punch when Tommy Patterson was bullying him in 4th grade, and she was also the one who held me while I cried after Dylan's first father-son camping trip invitation came home from Scouts. "You know what, buddy," she told Dylan that night, "camping trips are way more fun with awesome moms who know how to make s'mores and aren't afraid of bugs." Dylan never complained about our life, not once. While his friends had PlayStation games and expensive sneakers, Dylan was perfectly content with library books and hand-me-down cleats from his cousin Jake. He helped me plant a vegetable garden in our backyard, and every summer we'd have Dylan's famous tomato contests, where he'd judge which plants grew the biggest tomatoes. He'd make official certificates with crayons and present them to the winning plants with the seriousness of a Nobel Prize ceremony. I tried dating exactly twice. The first guy, Steve, was nice enough but kept trying to give Dylan parenting advice after knowing him for 3 weeks. The second, Michael, actually seemed promising until Dylan overheard him on the phone saying he wasn't ready for the baggage of a kid. Dylan never said anything to me about it, but I found him that night reading in his room instead of watching his usual cartoons. That's when I realized something important. Dylan and I weren't broken pieces waiting to be fixed by someone else. We were a complete family exactly as we were. By the time Dylan turned 16, we'd built something beautiful together. Our little house had become a home filled with laughter, books, soccer trophies, and the kind of deep contentment that comes from knowing you're exactly where you're supposed to be. Dylan had grown into this incredible young man, thoughtful, funny, responsible, and completely secure in who he was. He made honor roll every semester, captained his soccer team, and somehow managed to be the kid that other parents wish their teenagers were more like. I honestly thought Marcus was behind us forever. Dylan rarely mentioned him, seemed genuinely happy, and had built a life so full of love and purpose that there didn't seem to be any empty spaces left for his father to fill. We'd healed, we'd thrived, we'd proven that sometimes the family you build is stronger than the one that falls apart. I had no idea that everything was about to change. It was a perfect Saturday afternoon in October, the kind of crisp fall day where the leaves crunch under your feet and the air smells like apple cider and possibility. Dylan's soccer team, the Millfield Eagles, was playing in the regional championship, and I was sitting in my usual spot on the bleachers, 3rd row up, right behind the team bench where I could catch Dylan's eye and give him our secret thumbs-up signal before big plays. The game was intense. Dylan had already scored 1 goal, and with 15 minutes left on the clock, we were tied 2-2 against our biggest rivals, the Oakwood Panthers. I was cheering so loud my throat was getting hoarse when I noticed him. At first, it was just a feeling. You know that prickly sensation when someone's watching you? I turned around to scan the crowd, and that's when I saw the familiar profile 3 rows behind me. Marcus Reynolds, 8 years older, more expensive suit, but the same perfectly styled dark hair and that confident posture that used to make my knees weak. My heart literally stopped beating for a second. I gripped the metal bleacher so hard my knuckles turned white, hoping desperately that I was seeing things, that stress was making me hallucinate. But then I saw her. The woman sitting next to him was everything I wasn't. Blonde hair in a perfect bob, designer sunglasses despite the cloudy sky, and a smile that screamed, "My life is Instagram perfect." Jessica. It had to be. She was holding the hands of two identical little girls, maybe 6 years old with matching pink jackets and those expensive light-up sneakers that cost more than my monthly grocery budget. My stomach dropped as I watched Marcus lean over to Jessica and point directly at Dylan, who was setting up for a corner kick. I couldn't hear what he was saying, but I saw Jessica's perfectly lipsticked mouth form an O of understanding. The twins looked where their father was pointing, studying their half-brother with the curious intensity that only small children possess. Other parents around me had started to notice. Mrs. Peterson, whose son Jake plays midfield, kept glancing between Marcus's family and me with barely concealed curiosity. I could practically feel the town gossip mill cranking to life. Millfield is small enough that everyone knows everyone's business, and my story with Marcus had been dinner table conversation for years after he left. Dylan kicked the ball perfectly, sending it sailing toward the goal. His teammate Connor headed it in for the winning score, and the crowd erupted. I should have been celebrating, hugging the other parents, cheering for our boys. Instead, I was fighting the urge to grab my purse and run to my car before Marcus could see me. But I couldn't leave. This was Dylan's moment, his championship, and I wasn't about to let my coward of an ex-husband steal that from him. As the team celebrated on the field, I forced myself to clap and smile, all while my mind raced with questions. How long had Marcus been back? Why was he here? What did he want? The protective mother in me went into full alert mode, every instinct screaming that danger was approaching my child. After the game, Dylan ran over to me with that huge grin that lights up his entire face. "Mom, did you see that assist? Coach says scouts from 3 colleges were here today." I wrapped him in the biggest hug, breathing in the smell of grass stains and teenage boy sweat, trying to memorize this perfect moment before everything went sideways. "I'm so proud of you, honey," I managed to say, my voice barely steady. "Go celebrate with your team. I'll meet you at the car in 10 minutes. As Dylan jogged back to his teammates, I gathered my courage and turned toward the parking lot. That's when Marcus appeared, walking straight toward me with that same confident stride I remembered. Jessica hung back near their luxury SUV with the twins, clearly uncomfortable but trying to look supportive. "Sarah," he said, and hearing my name in his voice after 8 years of silence made my skin crawl. "We need to talk." I squared my shoulders and looked him dead in the eye. "No, Marcus, we really don't." But he kept talking anyway, because that's what Marcus Reynolds always did. He talked until he got what he wanted. Consequences be damned. "I know I haven't been present," Marcus continued, his lawyer voice smooth and practiced, "but things are different now. I'm different now. I want Dylan to meet his sisters." I felt like I was having an out-of-body experience, watching this conversation happen to someone else. "You don't get to waltz back in after 8 years and decide what Dylan needs," I said, my voice shakier than I wanted it to be. "You made your choice at that airport." Marcus had the audacity to look hurt. "Sarah, I was 28 years old. I was scared, overwhelmed. I made mistakes, but I've grown up. I have a stable life now, a good marriage. The girls deserve to know their brother, and Dylan deserves to know he has sisters." "Dylan deserves?" The words came out louder than I intended, causing other parents to glance our way. Dylan deserved a father who didn't abandon him when things got difficult. Dylan deserved birthday cards and Christmas presents and phone calls asking about his soccer games. You don't get to decide what he deserves now. I could see Jessica watching us from beside their car, the twins tugging at her perfect coat, probably asking why Daddy was talking to the angry lady. Marcus noticed my gaze and waved at them reassuringly, which somehow made everything worse. "Look," Marcus said, lowering his voice to that reasonable tone he used when he was about to get his way. "I've talked to my lawyer. I have rights here, Sarah. I'm not trying to disrupt Dylan's life, but I am his father. I want to be part of his future." The threat was clear, wrapped up in silk but sharp as a knife. Legal action, custody battles, the kind of expensive warfare that I couldn't afford but Marcus absolutely could. My hands started shaking, and I shoved them into my jacket pockets so he wouldn't see. That night, I sat at our kitchen table staring at a cup of coffee that had gone cold hours ago. Dylan found me there at almost midnight, still in my clothes from the game, still trying to process what had happened. "Mom?" He sat down across from me, his championship medal still hanging around his neck. "You've been weird since the game ended. What's going on?" I looked at my 16-year-old son, this incredible young man who made me coffee every morning and never forgot to take out the trash and somehow always knew exactly what to say when Mrs. Chen was having a bad day. And I realized I couldn't protect him from this. He deserved to know. "Dylan, honey, your father was at the game today." Dylan didn't even blink. "I know, Mom, I saw him." My mouth fell open. "You saw him? Why didn't you say anything?" "Because you looked happy, cheering for me, and I didn't want to ruin it." Dylan reached across the table and took my hand. "I've actually known he was back in town for about 2 weeks. I overheard Mrs. Patterson talking to Mrs. Chen at the grocery store about how that Reynolds man was back with his new family, asking around about rental properties." 2 weeks? I felt like the world's worst mother. "Dylan, why didn't you tell me?" "Because I was waiting to see what he'd do." Dylan's voice was calm, matter of fact. "I figured if he really wanted to see me, he'd find a way. And if he didn't, well, nothing would change." I stared at my son, amazed by his clarity. "And now that he has?" Dylan was quiet for a long moment. Then he got up and disappeared into his room. I heard drawers opening, papers rustling. When he came back, he was holding a sealed envelope, yellowed with age and slightly worn at the edges. "I wrote this the day he left," Dylan said, setting the envelope on the table between us. "I was 8, but I knew exactly what I wanted to say to him if he ever came back. I've been carrying it in my backpack every day since then, just in case." I reached for the envelope, but Dylan pulled it back gently. "No, Mom. This is between him and me, but I think it's time he read it." "Dylan, you don't have to." "Yes, I do." His voice was steady, sure. "I've been waiting 8 years to give this to him. I'm not angry anymore, Mom. I'm not hurt. I just want him to understand what his choice cost and what it taught me." The next morning, I called Marcus and agreed to meet him at Riverside Park, neutral ground where Dylan used to play as a little boy. As we got ready, I watched my son carefully fold that letter and put it in his jacket pocket, right over his heart. "Are you sure about this?" I asked him one more time. Dylan smiled, and for a moment I saw both the 8-year-old boy he'd been and the man he was becoming. I've never been more sure of anything in my life. Riverside Park looked exactly the same as it had 8 years ago. The same wooden playground where Dylan learned to climb monkey bars, the same oak tree where we'd had countless picnics, the same bench where I used to push him on the swings while he shrieked with laughter. The irony wasn't lost on me that we were meeting in the place where Dylan had experienced pure joy before his father ripped it away. Marcus arrived precisely on time, because punctuality was one of the few promises he'd ever kept. Jessica walked slightly behind him, holding the twins' hands, her designer heels clicking awkwardly on the gravel path. The girls looked adorable in their matching purple coats, their blonde curls bouncing as they skipped along, completely oblivious to the emotional battlefield they were about to witness. Dylan and I were waiting by the old oak tree. My son stood tall, his hands relaxed at his sides, that mysterious envelope tucked safely in his jacket pocket. I'd never been more proud of anyone in my entire life, and I'd never been more terrified. "Dylan," Marcus said, his voice softer than I'd heard it the day before, "you've grown so much. You look just like your mother when she was your age." "Actually, I look like Grandpa Joe," Dylan replied evenly. "Mom's father, the one who taught me how to throw a curveball and change a tire. You never met him." The comment hit its mark. Marcus's practiced smile faltered for just a moment before he recovered. "Right, well, I wanted you to meet your sisters. Emma, Lily. This is your big brother, Dylan." The twins stepped forward shyly, Emma clutching a small, stuffed elephant. "Hi," she whispered. "Daddy says you're really good at soccer." Dylan's entire demeanor softened as he crouched down to their eye level. "I am pretty good," he said with a gentle smile. Do you girls play any sports? We take ballet, Lily announced proudly, doing a little twirl that made her coat flare out. That's awesome. Ballet dancers are some of the strongest athletes in the world. I watched this interaction with my heart breaking and soaring simultaneously. Dylan was kind to his half-sisters. Of course he was. But there was something carefully controlled about it. Like he was protecting himself, even while being generous. Marcus cleared his throat. Dylan, I know I made mistakes when you were younger, but I'm here now and I want to make things right. I want to be part of your life. These girls, they need their big brother and you… Stop. Dylan stood up, his full height now obvious. At 16, he was already taller than Marcus, broader through the shoulders from years of soccer and the physical work he did helping our elderly neighbors. Just stop talking. Marcus looked genuinely surprised. Dylan, I understand you're angry. I'm not angry. Dylan's voice was perfectly calm. I was angry when I was 8. I was hurt when I was 10. I was confused when I was 12. But I haven't been any of those things for a long time now. Dylan reached into his jacket and pulled out the envelope. Marcus's eyes immediately focused on it, recognition flickering across his face. I wrote this the day you left, Dylan said, holding the letter out. I was 8 years old sitting in my room while Mom cried in the kitchen, trying to understand why my daddy didn't want me anymore. You were too busy packing and making phone calls to notice when I tried to give it to you at the house. You were too busy at the airport thinking about your new life to see me holding it. Marcus took the envelope with hands that were visibly shaking. Dylan, Read it, Dylan said firmly. Out loud, I want everyone here to know what an 8-year-old boy needed to say to the father who abandoned him. Jessica had gone completely still, her face pale as she realized what was happening. The twins sensed the tension and moved closer to their mother, Emma hugging her stuffed elephant tighter. Marcus opened the envelope carefully, his fingers trembling as he unfolded the piece of paper covered in careful third-grade handwriting. His eyes scanned the words once silently, and I watched his face crumble as he read what his 8-year-old son had written 8 years ago. Read it, Dylan repeated, his voice gentle but implacable. Out loud. Marcus's voice cracked as he began to read the letter aloud, each word hitting like a physical blow. Dear Dad, Mom cried when you left, but she told me it wasn't my fault. I don't understand why you don't want me. But I want you to know I'm going to be the best son I can be for Mom. She deserves someone who stays. I hope someday you learn what it means to keep promises. Your son who will never give up on people like you did, Dylan. The silence that followed was deafening. Marcus stood there holding that piece of paper like it was burning his hands, tears streaming down his face. Jessica had gone completely white, one hand covering her mouth as she stared at her husband with something that looked like horror. The twins had picked up on the tension and were hugging their mother's legs, confused and scared. I was 8 years old, Dylan said quietly, and I already understood something you still don't. When you love someone, you don't leave them behind. Marcus tried to speak, his voice barely a whisper. Dylan, I'm so sorry. I was young. I was scared. I didn't know how to… You didn't know how to what? Dylan's voice remained steady, but there was steel underneath it now. How to stay. How to be a father. How to put someone else's needs before your own wants. I can make it up to you, Marcus said desperately. I have money now. I can pay for college. I can… Stop. Dylan held up his hand. You think this is about money? You think you can write a check and suddenly become my father? Jessica stepped forward then, her voice shaking. Marcus, we should go. The girls are getting upset. But Dylan wasn't finished. He looked at Jessica with something that might have been pity. He told you he had a son, didn't he? But he never told you he abandoned that son. He never told you about the promises he broke or the 8-year-old boy who waited at the window every night for 6 months, thinking maybe his daddy would come back. Jessica's composure finally cracked. Marcus never said, he told me you were better off without him. He said your mother didn't want him involved. I couldn't stay quiet anymore. I begged him to stay in Dylan's life, I said, my voice strong and clear. I told him he could see Dylan whenever he wanted, that we could work out custody. He's the one who said he wanted a clean break. He's the one who said we'd never hear from him again. The twins started crying then, overwhelmed by the adult emotions swirling around them. Emma dropped her stuffed elephant and reached for Jessica, who immediately scooped both girls up, her own tears falling now. Dylan's expression softened as he looked at his half-sisters. "Hey, it's okay," he said gently to them. "The grown-ups are just talking. You didn't do anything wrong." Then he turned back to Marcus, and his voice was different. Not angry, not hurt, just final. "I don't need your apology, and I don't need your money. I needed my dad when I was 8 years old. Now I'm 16, and I'm exactly who I'm supposed to be. Someone who doesn't abandon people." Marcus was sobbing now, ugly tears that made him look smaller somehow. "Please, Dylan, I know I don't deserve it, but please give me a chance. I want to know you. I want to be better." "You can send me a graduation announcement," Dylan said calmly. "You can read about me in the local paper when I make varsity captain next year. But you don't get to be my dad. That job was already filled by my mom, by my grandma Linda, by Coach Peterson, who taught me how to be a man, by all the people who stayed when staying was hard." Dylan took a step closer to his father, and for a moment they were eye to eye, the broken man and the strong young man he'd helped create through his absence. "But here's what you can do," Dylan continued. "You can be a real father to Emma and Lily. You can show up to their dance recitals and help with their homework and teach them that when you love someone, you fight for them. You can make sure they never have to write a letter like the one I've been carrying for 8 years. He turned to Jessica then. "And you can make sure he keeps that promise because those little girls deserve better than what I got." Dylan walked over to me and put his arm around my shoulders. "Come on, Mom, let's go home. We have Sunday pancakes to make tomorrow." As we walked back toward our car, I heard Jessica say quietly to Marcus, "We're going home too. Tonight, and we're going to have a very long conversation about the man I thought I married." 6 months later, Dylan graduated as valedictorian. Marcus sent a card with $500 inside. Dylan donated the money to the local youth center and threw the card away without reading it. But he kept that letter. He framed it and hung it in his dorm room at Northwestern, where he's studying social work. Because sometimes the things that break us also make us unbreakable. And sometimes the people who fail us teach us exactly who we never want to become. Dylan is everything Marcus never was: reliable, present, and someone who keeps his promises. And every morning when I wake up, I thank God that my son learned to be a man from everyone except his father. You know, when I first started telling this story, people always ask me if I regret what happened that day at the park. They wonder if maybe I should have protected Dylan from that confrontation, if maybe I should have handled Marcus differently. But here's what I've learned. Dylan didn't need my protection that day. He needed my trust. He needed to know that I believed in the incredible young man he'd become, strong enough to face his past and wise enough to choose his future. That letter Dylan carried for 8 years wasn't just words on paper. It was proof that even at 8 years old, he understood something profound about love, loyalty, and what it means to never give up on the people who matter. He carried those words until the exact moment when Marcus needed to hear them most. Today, Dylan is 24 years old. He graduated summa cum laude from Northwestern with his master's in social work, and he runs a program for children in single-parent homes. He helps kids whose fathers walked away, whose mothers are struggling, whose families don't look like what everyone else thinks they should. And every single one of those kids knows that no matter what happens, Dylan Mitchell will never give up on them. He's engaged now to a wonderful woman named Rachel, who loves his Sunday pancake tradition and thinks our little house is perfect exactly as it is. They're planning their wedding for next spring, and Dylan asked me to walk him down the aisle. "You taught me what it means to stay," he told me, "so you should be the one to give me away when it's time." As for Marcus, he sends a Christmas card every year with updates about Emma and Lily. They're beautiful, happy girls who dance and play soccer and seem to have a father who finally learned what it means to show up. I hope for their sake that's true. I hope Dylan's words that day changed something fundamental in Marcus, because those little girls deserve better than what Dylan got. But the most important thing I want you to take from our story is this: the people who abandon us don't get to define us. The promises other people break don't have to break us. Sometimes the most powerful thing we can do is become everything they weren't brave enough to be. Dylan taught me that children are incredibly resilient, but more than that, they're incredibly wise. That 8-year-old boy who wrote a letter to his father understood something about character that took his father decades to even begin to grasp. Sometimes our kids teach us just as much as we teach them. If you're watching this and you're raising a child alone, if you're that kid who got left behind, if you're struggling to understand why someone who was supposed to love you chose to walk away, remember Dylan's story. Remember that you get to choose who you become. You get to decide whether their failure makes you bitter or makes you better. And if you're someone who walked away from a child, if you're carrying guilt about promises you broke or love you withheld, it might be too late to be the parent you should have been, but it's never too late to be the person you want to become moving forward. If this story touched your heart, please hit that like button and share it with someone who needs to hear it. Your share might be exactly what someone needs to feel less alone today. And if you want to hear more real stories about resilience, family, and the incredible strength of the human spirit, make sure to subscribe to our channel and ring that notification bell. We share new stories every week that will inspire you, move you, and remind you that no matter what you're going through, you're stronger than you think. Drop a comment below and tell us, what's the most powerful lesson someone taught you without meaning to? I read every single comment, and your stories inspire the content we create. Until next time, remember, you are enough, you are worthy of love, and you get to write your own ending. See you in the next video.